Hey everybody, my name is Juwan, and welcome to my channel Faithfully Living, where we learn how to study the Bible together. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the wisdom literature section of the Bible. But before we get started, do me a favor by subscribing, liking, and sharing this video. You can also follow this channel on Instagram at Faithfully Living. Alright, let's get started. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. This section of the Bible is called wisdom literature because of its emphasis on understanding and obtaining wisdom for all areas of life, our relationship with God, and our relationship with others. This section of the Bible is also called poetic literature because it has large elements of poetic structure within its books. So how can we approach the wisdom books to better understand and study the Bible? We can look at it broadly through the lens of context, culture, character of God, and Christ. So the first section is going to be context. So when we think about context, we're thinking about the author, the audience, the intent of the author, the genre, the theme of the book. So when we look at the wisdom literature of this section of the Bible, there are going to be various authors such as Moses, David, Solomon. When we look at the audience, it doesn't speak directly to Israel at a certain time in history, but spans a broad span of time within the Old Testament. And then we come to genre. It's going to be a lot of poetry. There's some writings within the wisdom books, but it's going to be a lot of poetry. So when we think about poetry, we're going to think about Hebrew poetry. Hebrew poetry is going to be different from English poetry that we know that we studied in school. So when we think of Hebrew poetry, it has a different structure and different makeup than English poetry has. So Hebrew poetry has a lot of parallelisms, figures of speech that are different from English. So when you're reading each individual book within this section, you want to keep in mind that it has a different tone, a different structure within the book. So learn what the different structures of the Hebrew poetry of that book of the Bible that you're reading. It's going to help you better understand what's being written. So for example, you have Job. It's a narrative, but it also has some poetry in it. Then you have Proverbs, which has short sayings that give you rules for happiness on how to live life. So just when you're reading each individual book, be mindful and cognizant of the genre, the poetry, the layout, and the structure. It's going to help you better understand that book of the Bible that you're reading. So the next lens we want to look at is going to be culture. So knowing the time frame in which these books are written is going to help you better understand the writings of the books within this section. So the time frame, like I said, is going to be a broad one from the time of Abraham to possibly the time of the children of Israel returning back from exile. So you have the time of children of Israel living within Canaan. You have the ancient Near East culture in which they live. You have Babylonian, Assyrian, Egyptian, just to name a few. So these are the cultures in which the children of Israel interacted with and possibly the time frame in which these books were written. So when you think about that, the wisdom literature is going to kind of parallel the literary style of the time. So if you understand the literary style within this time frame, it's going to help you better understand the structure of the way things were written. It's going to help you understand the figures of speech such as imagery and metaphors in which it was used, because it's often going to parallel what was happening in the culture of that day. So the next section is going to be the character of God. Within the wisdom literature, we learn about God as creator, provider, his sovereignty, just to name a few. But we also see the humanity of man's response and how he can respond to God and how he responds to life situation. So for example, we see Job, we see the providence of God. We also see the human suffering of man and man's response to that suffering. So this wisdom literature kind of takes us through the emotions that we as humans often express and how our response can be to God. So we can see in Psalms, a lot of the Psalms of David, we see him crying out to God, but we also see him worshiping and giving praise to God. We can see Ecclesiastes, how Solomon is showing us what life can be without God. and then how life can be with God. So it's just going to help us go through help us to understand how to respond to the different situations in our life, and to realize and to see the character of God within our life situations. Even though we have these ranges of emotions, that God still has certain attributes that He portrays, and that we can always trust in Him. So the last lens that we're going to be looking at is Christ. So when you look at the wisdom literature, it might be a little bit more challenging to see Christ within this section of the Bible. So it's always helpful to get out that commentary or handbook to kind of help you guide, help you see where you can find Christ within this section of the Bible. There are some Psalms that point to the coming of Christ, so you can kind of look for those. And then also an example, you have the Song of Psalms, are also called the Song of Solomon, that have a theme of love that kind of illustrates Christ's love for the church as the bride of Christ. So that's kind of like an illustration of how Christ is exemplified within the wisdom literature. So get some help, get those commentaries, handbooks out to kind of help you dig a little bit deeper into finding Christ within this section of the Bible. So these 5 books of the wisdom literature help us deal with the struggles and real life situations that we deal with today. It helps us to find words for our struggles, of the things that we face in life. It also helps us to remember that the God of the Israelites during this period of time is the same God that we can know and trust today. So thanks for watching this video. I hope it was helpful for you to better understand this section of the Bible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.